disadvantaged communities. Most of this data is available at a county level, at the census tract level, and others may be at a zip code level or even a point level when it comes to things like crime and accidents. This has meant that more areas of disadvantage can be assessed, including health metrics, environmental metrics, and more. So here are the comparisons of how the Justice 40 and the SACOG environmental justice compare. As you can see, there may be significant similarities in the covering of the same topics, but that doesn't mean that they are using the same exact metrics or thresholds. Metrics may include income and poverty levels, educational attainment, unemployment and job opportunities, health disparities, housing conditions, environmental factors, historical discrimination, and systemic factors. For example, low-income households are almost always included in identifying disadvantaged areas, but how to measure low-income households can mean many things in different ways and in different places. This table compares the latest 2023 low-income thresholds for the SACOG region based on the different types of metrics commonly used. SACOG uses the 200 of poverty level for a family of 4, which is 60,000, while other agencies and MPOs may use different thresholds.
Hey, Jeannie, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Maybe
sure.
That slide for a second. I just, so I hope I was teeing this up appropriately. As I said to you, I hope we gave you the sort of the warning here. This is very technical, right? There's a lot of data in here, but it is really important stuff. And you all may have some familiarity with, with some of this and some of these definitions, and poverty level, like you say, is frequently used. My point is here, if board members, oh, it's going to be hard for me to see this though, because I only see the screen. I was going to say, if board members have questions, if you could just speak up as we go. I mean, you can certainly hold them till the end of the presentation, but that was really what I was doing, is allowing people a chance to clarify something with all the information we're providing. You can also just kind of wait till the end till Jeannie finishes as well. So, because I know it's a lot of stuff, but it is really interesting. It's really important. Okay, back to you, Jeannie.
Okay, thank you. So let's look at our examples and definition. So the federal departments generally create their own definition and criteria that may differ greatly from one another and may differ in between programs within the same department. So definition is key. One definition of disadvantaged communities refers to a specific group or geographic area that experiences significant social, economic, or environmental challenges that hinder their overall well-being and limit access to resources and opportunities. These challenges may include poverty, limited access to quality education, inadequate healthcare facilities, high crime rates, unemployment, racial or ethnic discrimination, environmental pollution, and other factors that contribute to social and economic inequality. Disadvantaged communities often face systemic barriers and have fewer resources and support compared to more privileged communities. They also can exist within the urban, suburban, and rural areas. Efforts to address the needs of disadvantaged communities often involve implementing policies, programs, and initiatives aimed at reducing inequalities and improving access to essential services, such as affordable housing, healthcare, education, job opportunities, and environmental protection. I know that's a long definition, but you'll see how we relate that. So the first example we'll be looking at are the first 2 iterations of the federal U.S. Department of Transportation draft Justice 40 areas. The federal government has made it a goal that 40% of overall benefits of certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized, underserved, or overburdened. The U.S. Department of Transportation sees Justice 40 initiative as an opportunity to address gaps in transportation infrastructure and public services by working towards goals that are at least 40% of the benefits for many grants, programs, and initiatives flow to disadvantaged communities. In May of 2022, the Department of Transportation released their first draft map, that is the green map. This map was created by using the interim geographies of the historically disadvantaged communities, which include certain qualifying census tracts, any tribal lands, or any territories or possessions of the United States. This first draft has been coined the everything but the kitchen sink approach, which resulted in a large amount of areas within the SACOG region being identified as the Justice 40 area. It includes data for 22 indicators collected at a census tract level and grouped into 6 categories of transportation disadvantage. Those categories are transportation access disadvantaged, health disadvantaged, environmentally disadvantaged, economic disadvantage, resilience disadvantage, and equity disadvantaged. Subsequently, in November of 2022, the Department of Transportation released a second draft map. Revisions were made as a result of many interested parties claiming that too many places would qualify for unsupportable reasons. More work was done to adjust the criteria, and the second draft map was released that significantly shrunk areas that would qualify within the SACOG region. I've had talks with planners in Placer County and El Dorado County recently who asked about the Justice 40 maps, and we have contacted the Department of Transportation and we're waiting to hear from them. And from what we understand, there will be a final version that will come in spring, I think, of next year. So right now, final Justice 40 criteria is still pending. There's a lot of continued interest in what the final geographies will be and what criteria will qualify as the disadvantaged community. This DOT is still going through their process to identify their final criteria. There is a US DOT Equitable Transportation Community, or ETC Explorer, that includes detailed background information on how the Justice 40 process has been undertaken by the department. This is the screenshot of their online tool. Even though the Justice 40 geographies are draft, various federal departments or programs are using the geography for analysis. One is the Council on Environmental Quality released the Climate and Economic Screening Tool, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention also are using the Justice 40 geographies and released it for the Environmental Justice Index. Does anybody have any questions about Justice 40? Nope. I'm going to go on. Okay. Next is the SACOG example of the environmental justice area. Most definitions share the themes of equal protection, community involvement, and healthy living environments. The concept of environmental justice emerged in response to the recognition that certain communities, particularly low-income communities and communities of color, are disproportionately exposed to environmental hazards and pollutions. These communities often face a higher prevalence of toxic waste sites, industrial facilities, air and water pollution, and other environmental risks. Environmental justice seeks to address these disparities and advocate for the right to a healthy and sustainable environment for all individuals and communities. Next are the criteria that SACOG uses for their environmental justice area. SACOG is required by law to do an environmental justice and Title VI analysis part of the Metropolitan Transportation Sustainable Community Strategy. Through this analysis, SACOG can determine if the plan has any disproportionate negative impacts on low-income people and/or people of color living in the region, and if the plan has disparate impacts specifically based on race, color, or national origin. The criteria that we use in the current adopted 2020 MTP are: 1, race and ethnicity. We look at block groups where the non-white or Hispanic resident population is 70% or higher. 2, low income. Block groups where 45% or more of households earn less than the 200% of the federal poverty level. 3, we look at CalEnviro Screen, and we're using for the 2020, the CalEnviro Screen 3.0. CalEnviro Screen is a screening tool that evaluates the burden of pollution from the multiple sources in communities while accounting for potential vulnerabilities to the adverse effects of pollution. 4, we look at other vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities are block groups that fall within the top quintile of all regional block groups in at least 4 of the following 6 measures. Those measures are concentration of older adults aged 75 or more, concentration of linguistically isolated households, concentration of single parent households with children under the age of 18, concentrations of low education attainment with less than a high school diploma or GED for the population aged 25 or more. We're looking at concentration of severely housing cost burden households, where households spend 50% or more of their income on housing costs, and that's both for renter and owner households. And then we look at concentration of households with at least one person with a disability. So this map is our 2020 MTP EJ area. This map shows the different block groups that have been identified as an EJ area from SACOG 2020 MTP SES. The blue block groups have met one or more of the criteria we just discussed. There are many overlaps within the category. For example, the majority of EJ areas identified as all their vulnerabilities already met the low income or high minority criteria. If you are interested in finding more in-depth information on how SACOG has developed the regional criteria for determining environmental justice areas, please go to the SACOG website and find the 2020 MTP SES under regional plans. The current criteria can be found in the 2020 MTP under Appendix H for a detailed description on the SACOG website. Page 19 through 44 of that PDF has a one-page summary of the region, as well as a one-page summary for each county and each jurisdiction within the SACOG region. These reports compare EJ areas and non-EJ areas within the jurisdiction in terms of racial distribution and household income. The lower half of the page show mode share data and the SACOG with the SACOG travel model. The columns on the left represent the trip modes of households residing in each EJ or non-EJ area within the jurisdiction, while the icons to the right reflect the changes in active transportation trips by EJ communities, residents compared to other areas, either region or specific counties. Lastly, here's the map that shows the draft EJ areas for the 2025 blueprint. The same criteria from the 2020 MTP SES is being used for this analysis, with updated data from the 2019 5-year Census ACS and from Cal Enviroscreen version 4.0. For this round, staff have also been looking into identifying smaller geographies in census designated places or CDPs in the rural areas that meet one or more of the criteria. The SACOG EJ areas are an important component in the MTP SES, but we also use this EJ for analysis in the regional funding round, the regional active transportation program, and also included in the map and narrative for the RAISE grant application. SACOG will finalize our geographies and adopt a new EJ area with the 2025 blueprint. I know that was a lot of information. So I'm ready for any comments or questions. And thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Jeannie. You did a great job with a lot of very technical information. Much appreciated. So I know we have a number of other more public members on the Zoom here, but if there are board members who have any comments or questions, clarifications. Okay, Director Bielhan. Director Bielhan? She may have frozen. Director Gore.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. Lots of data. I have a question for you about the ethnicity. So I heard you say that areas that are 70% or more of an ethnicity would be considered. But if you have an area that's
I just like to make a comment.
Sorry, Director Gore. Director Bielhan, yeah, thank you. It sounds like you've got a bad connection. And so you're glitched. Director Bielhan, if you can hear me, you've got you're glitching with a connection, and I bet you can't hear me.
James, I think there's a delay because I did mute her, but I think there's a delay in how it's coming through the speaker. So maybe give it a moment.
Yeah.
I think she finished. Now we can answer. Pam, we can't hear you because it's all garbled.
And PS, we need better broadband in Ileton. That's one thing we definitely know. And many places. Yeah. Speaking of anyway, Director Gore.
Yeah, so I'll try. Thank you. So the question about ethnicity, right? 70% or more. So if an area does not have 70% ethnicity, I noticed the other factors. So other factors can be included, correct? Whether that's the environment, poverty, right? Is that correct? Like if it doesn't have one category, it could have several categories, right?
Yes. So we do look at every block group in the region, and if they are identified in any of those indicators that we mentioned with race and ethnicity, with low income, and then CalEnviro screen, we also look at, and then we look at those vulnerabilities. So we do consider all that, even though maybe it does not make the 70% threshold. It might be low income. There might be other CalEnviro screen indicators in there, or any of the other vulnerabilities.
So it may not be the high on all of them, but might be high enough on many of the indicators to include it.
Yes.
Okay. And then a question for you about the smaller rural areas. Could you clarify that a little bit? Because I didn't quite get what the criterion was for some of these smaller rural areas that we're looking at.
So what we, so in the past, our methodology has always been looking at block groups, which are smaller than census tracts. So the Justice 40 does look at census tracts. So we try to do it with a smaller geography of block groups. So that is what our EJ areas are consistent with. But we have, we've had talks with various jurisdictions about why they're not part of an EJ. And one of the things that we've been looking at is looking at census designated places, which are CDPs. They're smaller communities that we've used the same thresholds and indicators where we can find the data for these CDPs and try to include them into our disadvantaged communities.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Jeannie, can I try this just to build off? I am so not a technical person, but just to kind of build off that point, because what was interesting is when Jeannie showed the block groups, the map that you showed earlier, right? So
yes,
this makes sense, right? It's almost like congressional districts, like the ones in the urban areas, the core very small, so we can kind of drill down. The ones in rural areas are huge, right? So within that geography, there may be a lot of things going on in there, right? In terms of populations, income, age, race, ethnicity, you don't pick up necessarily, right? And that's where the census designated places might come in to play. Is that right, Jeannie?
yes,
I'm doing my best job translating.
yes,
I understand this too.
yes.
But I would also say, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, right? So right, we want to make it, we have made a commitment, and we want to make good on the commitment about equity and inclusion and disadvantaged communities and everything else. And as Jeannie said earlier, like there's many different ways to define this. We're trying to give you the SACOG EJ definition and Justice 40 at the federal level. But as I think I learned helping some of our local communities apply for federal grants, you may not show up on a map, but if you have data locally, if you can tell a story about lack of access, poor health outcomes, like I think that actually still is relevant and will, I think, again, maybe depending on the grant program, I don't want to overspeak, but right, so the data only goes so far, right? And on the ground knowledge and some more qualitative, this is the thing we're trying to fix. Director Lauren was just talking about this community in Winters that is on 128 that's kind of cut off by the 505 freeway from downtown Winters, right? That may not show up on a map, but it's a very compelling justification for investment in a safer roadway and facility. So I'm not trying to diminish the importance of disadvantage. I'm just also saying, like, sometimes the data only goes so far. other Director Buellheim, looks like we got a better connection with you now. I'm sorry about earlier. Elliot, should we try?
Well, actually, I'm a customer
No.
today, but I have this temporary air cooler that's really loud.
Still, I think we're still having a technical issue with you. You could email my question, or we could certainly follow up because there's a lag and it's very hard to hear you.
Yeah.
You could try turning your video off, or you could just email us, and I mean, anybody can do this, right? We're hoping to get some interest, some you know, get the point across about these kinds of definitions, and this is not a one and done. So we're here to help you and help answer your questions. Okay, anybody else? All right, doing my best on the other attendees here. Anybody else on the panel? Well, I know it's a lot of technical data. Jeannie, fantastic job. I have learned a lot in the last month of you all preparing this presentation, honestly, and with the maps. And again, I just want to emphasize, I think for everybody, it's while the data has limitations, it is really important. I think that we all get a handle on this. We're available to work with all of your staffs, right? About again, really understanding these definitions and how they play out. Complementing that with sort of again, a lot of the local knowledge and more of the qualitative evidence about disadvantaged and communities that are impacted and disinvested and everything else. So if there are no more comments or questions, we will call the lunch. We'll wrap it up. Again, I really want to thank our SACOG staff we put a lot of work into this. We went back and forth on maps and data and everything else. And oh, Director Vang has her hand up. Okay, Director Vang.
Thanks, James. Sorry, I was a little bit slow to put my hands up, but
right.
First, I just wanted to say thank you to Jenny. Jenny, just thank you so much for your presentation and just being incredibly thorough with the numerous ways of how, you know, different entities actually define disadvantaged communities. I think we all know that every city and county, you know, in this country faces challenges of eliminating inequities, and not just race, but income as well. And so I just really appreciate SACOG's leadership on this, staff's hard work, to be really intentional about the ways that we're proactively defining and figuring out ways to really advance racial equity and inclusion. And I know that race is, you know, one part of the picture, and it is how I see it is that it's just one of many indicators that really impact health and social outcomes. I think James shared a little bit that, yeah, absolutely, the data still has lots of limitation, but I see that there's actually a lot of intersectionality of what is happening on the ground, right? So it's not just race, but it's incomes, it's suburban areas, right, or more suburban areas that actually don't have access to transportation. And so I think a big part of this is really telling our stories. So when we talk about disadvantaged communities, race is one big component of it, but there's so many other indicators as well. And so I just really appreciate, again, staff's leadership on this, James, your leadership on this as well, and really look forward to working with the board throughout, all the board members throughout the region, to make sure that we're uplifting all of our communities. So I just wanted to make that comment and say thank you so much.
Great. Well, I think that's an excellent note to end on. So again, we're here to answer questions. This is an ongoing, I think, you know, work for all of us, right? But you've got, I think you know this, you've got a great team here with Yanmei and Jeannie and many others. Tina Glover, who couldn't be with us today. So we're here to help. We're here to help your staff at your jurisdictions. Here to help demystify some of this, better define it, better understand it. And yeah, thanks for your participation. And again, thank you, Jeannie and Yanmei, for an excellent presentation. All right, take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.